Anne Frank was a German girl and Jewish victim of the Holocaust who was famous for keeping a diary of her experiences. Anne and her family went into hiding for 2 years to avoid Nazi persecution. Her documentation of this time is now published in the Diary of a Young Girl. She was born on June 12, 1929, in Frankfurt, Main, Germany. Her parents were Otto and Edith Frank. For the first 5 years of her life, Anne lived with her parents and older sister, whose name was Margot. They lived in an apartment on the outskirts of Frankfurt. After the Nazis came to power in 1933, Otto Frank fled to Amsterdam in the Netherlands, where he had business connections. The rest of the Frank family soon followed, with Anne being the last of the family to arrive February 1934 after staying with her grandparents.
1942, 3 years after the Nazis invaded Poland, the Nazis began expanding their influence throughout Europe. In a city called Amsterdam, located in the Netherlands, lived a young girl who was receiving a diary from a friend called Mitch for her 13th birthday. This young girl was called Anne Frank. She used the diary to write about her feelings and thoughts as she lived in an annex for 761 days, hiding from the Nazis. Anne hid with her family and some of her father's acquaintances, who were the Rampiels family and Fritz Pfeiffer. To eat, the people living in the annex received food from Jan Gies and his wife who smuggled it, always risking their lives in order for the Franks and their acquaintances to eat. Anne spent most of her time writing about how she felt. One of Anne's quotes was, "It's difficult in times like these. Ideals, dreams, and cherished hopes rise within us, only to be crushed by grim reality. It's really wonder that I haven't dropped all my ideals, because they seem so absurd and impossible to carry out. Yet I keep them because in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart." Anne Frank, 1942. Tragedy struck for the Franks and their acquaintances when they got discovered on August 4th, 1944, by Nazi soldiers who received an anonymous tip that Jews were hiding in the annex of a building.
Anne Frank, her family, and the rest of the people hiding in this secret annex building were discovered and raided on August 4th, 1944 by the Nazi police in Amsterdam. It is believed that Anne Frank had been given up by an anonymous tip. After receiving this tip, the Gestapo raided the annex building and arrested 8 Jews, including the Frank family. It is widely believed to be William Van Maren, a warehouse employee, that tipped off the Nazi police. Otto, Anne's father, was one of the first to suspect that someone had betrayed them. The Franks, along with most of the others apprehended, were taken to the Auschwitz concentration camp. In the fall of 1944, Anne Frank and her sister moved to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. Due to horrible conditions, the sister caught typhus fever in February 1945. Belsen was later released by the British in less than 2 months. Edith Frank died of starvation in Auschwitz concentration camp in 1945. Otto was one of the 10 people that survived the concentration camp, and the only one survived out of the group that he was hiding with. Following Otto Frank's release from Auschwitz, he returned to Amsterdam, where one of his employees handed him Anne's diary, and that was left after the raid.
Anne Frank's diary was first published in 1947, 2 years after her death, and her words are now immortalized as a symbol of the victims of the Holocaust. Otto, her father, was reading words he had never imagined his daughter could write. As he read, he came to an unnerving conclusion. He had never really known her. In an interview after the events of the Holocaust, he stated that, "I knew that Anne wrote a diary, but I must say I was very much surprised about the deep thoughts Anne had. It was quite a different Anne than I had known as my daughter. My conclusion is that most parents don't know really their children." After the events of the Holocaust and receiving his only remembrance of his daughter, Anne, Otto began sharing translated portions of the diary with his mother, then telling others to do the same. Eventually, he was persuaded by a historian and a friend who convinced him that the diary was a significant document, and he agreed to see it published. But the manuscript that Otto Frank pitched to Dutch editors didn't contain his daughter's whole diary. Anne herself had begun editing very large swaths of her diary with publishing in mind after hearing a radio broadcast that called on Dutch people to preserve diaries and other war documents. Otto respected some of those editorial decisions, but overlooked others. For example, he included material about Anne's crush on Alex dweller Peter von Pels, a boy the same age as Anne that was hiding in the attic of the secret annex with his and Anne's family. Otto made his own cuts as well. He removed some passages that Anne wrote about the critical of her parents' marriage and erased sections about sexuality and her often brutal comments about friends, family members, and acquaintances. In earlier passages from the diary that Otto had discarded completely from the first edition, Anne described her classmates as everything from a detestable, sneaky, stuck-up, two-faced gossip to pretty boring. The book, though, was an instant success, gaining worldwide fame and soaring to immediate symbolism. It was especially revered for its impact among the adolescents around her age. Mary Lane wrote for the English Journal in 1956, "As seen through Anne's eyes, the evil of discrimination have made a terrific impact on these young people's minds." At the time, the events Anne recounted were so recent that Lane herself was able to write to Otto Frank, Anne's father, and even visit Mip Gies in Amsterdam. But though readers like Lane said the book helped them see adolescence in a new light, they had no real clue as to how much material Otto and his publishers had suppressed and destroyed, never to be read by the public eye.